We had Starcraft and then the expansion for that, Brood War, which were both real-time strategy games on the PC. And when we were thinking about what kind of game we wanted to make and where we wanted to set it, we really thought, oh wow, Starcraft universe, that would be a great place for us to put it. It's just got such a great history and background. All the different races that are very unique in the way that they play in the strategy game could really present a lot of different and also very unique challenges for players to navigate. And then we thought about, well, who would be our hero, who we're going to have run through the world. The Ghost unit, from the Terran side, really came to mind because there are so many different things that that unit can do. The Ghost is really integral in the storyline of StarCraft, as well as just being an incredibly fun unit to play when you boil it down to controlling just a single unit. From a story perspective, really the Ghosts represent the Terrans, or the people from the far, far descendants of Earth that have some kind of psionic or mental ability. They're the reason that the Zerg, which are kind of this all-encompassing biological menace, first come to find the Terrans because they don't have any psionic ability. They kind of ingest and take the best parts out of other races as they absorb them, and so they wanted to gain that psionic ability from the humans. That's also why then the Protoss, who are the other players in our story, show up because the Zerg are there, and they identify that it's why they're there, and they don't want them to have that. So what the Ghost unit represents is kind of why the whole story happens. And then from a gameplay perspective, the Ghost is this great combination of being someone who is trained to just the heights of ability, both mentally and physically, and has everything from just like the cool ability to kind of cloak herself with their mind to being able to see everything in all these different spectrums, being able to move at hyper speeds because she's so physically well trained, and then just has all this like really incredibly fun pieces of technology and equipment she gets to use, up to and including calling down nuclear strikes. Nova kind of represents a Ghost who's going through the program, has been involved with this branch of the Terran military since she was very young, and she's just not really working out like her handler, whose name is Haller, is envisioned. He kind of wanted to make her his protege, knew that she would be the one that would maybe someday take over for him, and she doesn't really quite anymore exactly follow with what he wants to have happen. So one of the things that we do to grow the character throughout the game, and then also through the storyline, is Haller kind of lets her know that there's maybe some more that she could really do with her mind than she knows that she can. We kind of find out that the way that the Ghosts are handled, the way that they're kind of manipulated in a way, is that they have psionic dampeners. That's one of the ways that the Terran military controls them. And so Haller lets her know that those aren't necessarily permanent things. They can be overcome. And so as she continues to do what he wants her to do, it's really always under that carrot that's kind of dangled in front of her that she's going to become a little less controlled and maybe a little more of what she could maybe want to be for herself. And so it's a really nice growth path for the character in terms of the story, and then also a great gameplay mechanic for us to introduce more and more abilities as the player moves along through the game. There's definitely elements within the Terrans that have different agendas than the ruling class, and so there are times where she's got to deal with Terrans as well. And certainly, in many cases, she has a big upper hand against kind of your normal everyday grunt marine and fire bats. When she has to fight the Protoss, they definitely provide a very different challenge. They easily have a same level or even higher at times of psionic abilities that she does. And they also kind of have that advantage of though they at times can be a little frailer of form, they have energy shields they get to kick on, and these great, actually taking their psionic abilities to levels to actually project them into weapons of psionic power. And so it'll be really interesting, I think, for players when they get there, just like it was in the strategy titles, of where you've got to change your tactics around. Now you're facing a completely different kind of enemy that has different strengths and hopefully different weaknesses that you'll be able to exploit as well. The ones we showed today in the demo, we've got you on Marsara, which was really where kind of some of the first battles happened. It's where the Zerg really first appeared in the Starcraft storyline, and it's one of the places we kind of start you in our story as well. Though right now it's kind of become a a continual battlefield and becoming more of a stronghold for the Zerg in this sector of space. We also take you to Ire, which is the Protoss homeworld. We really wanted to show a lot of different environments. That's one thing we felt we could do that was really different in our game than a lot of these types of kind of tactical, stealthy action games, is to give you a lot of different places you go that provide a lot of different visions of the universe that we've built. So you'll get to see where the Protoss come from, really explore it. Of course, not only do you have the Protoss there, but all their technologies there too. So having to sneak past a camera that's there to detect your movement in a Terran base, now you've got these big proton cannons that are out there that are ready to blast you, to the other side of the galaxy if you're not careful, if you don't, get around them or find ways to disarm them. There are several more places that we're going to take players, and we really want to use it to not only follow the storyline of what we're doing, but really to give a lot of different kind of fun and exciting play environments, things that are as compact as like being inside of like a Terran science facility, to even being out in huge, massive battlefields. We have two ways to use vehicles. One is through call downs. Call downs are something that's very unique to the Ghost in the real-time strategy game, where she can basically use or pass along information and then also use these abilities of other units. We'll be able to do things like call down irradiation beams from science vessels, which are great against organic targets in large open areas. Being able to call down different types of vehicles like siege tanks, even things like being able to target aerial units and then calling a Yamato strike, a cannon strike against them, or even kind of the big one, which is the one that's a little dangerous to use. You got to be in just the right spot, is to call down a nuke strike in a battlefield. So we wanted to have that element of vehicles in that way. You could bring dropships in to drop stuff off, bring in siege tanks in specific places to provide support. We also wanted to have a couple of vehicles you could get into. Nova will be able to use the Vulture hover bikes, which not only give her a lot of different speed of movement in areas that she'll probably be able to get to, because it does hover that maybe she wouldn't be able to get to on her own. But of course also they come equipped with spider mines, so there's a little tactical element on where you can put those. And then we're also going to let her get inside of a Goliath, which is kind of our light assault walker vehicle, which is good against ground and air units. And those are really fun. They play very differently. They're easy to play, and it just gives you this whole different level of firepower or mobility depending on what you're in. Some of those would be special things you get to use maybe one time, but we do also want to make those a part of unlocking what she can do. I mean, I think definitely we'll have to build the levels a couple different ways at times to know whether you've received the ability yet or not. If you haven't earned it yet, then it's got to play one way. If you have earned it, you can play a different way. And build a level to be very balanced that way, and then add on, as we continue to build level, all these really just at times kind of like crazy ways you can approach the level, and then try to reward players in different ways for taking those. I know a lot of people just like to get in there and just really do the run and gun thing, and we want there to be an element of that so players get a feeling for that. That's certainly where things like jumping the Goliath is great. It's a great outlet. If you're like, man, I've had to be sneaky and stealthy for the last 2 hours, and I just want to get in and just blow the crap out of something, right? And you're like, okay, great. And then right about then is when we want you to find that Goliath and hop in it and just to, taking Zergs out like 10, 20 at a time, and that'll be the idea of that level. And so we do want to build that in, but balance is something that is really difficult and something that is always a challenge, and no matter what kind of game we're doing. So we just kind of want to apply, everything we've learned balance-wise from, like the strategy games, the role-playing we've done, and put that same kind of concept into this game where, it's built for a certain level of success a certain way, and then we get to basically kind of play with that balance the more that you go in it. The biggest incentive you get is you get to do it with somebody else. And that's kind of an intangible that you don't necessarily build in as a specific gameplay reward. But you get to try a lot of different stuff when there's two of you. And so that is part of the reward. Also, really what we want to do is to look at if we do things like co-op plays, like, well, how would we change the map? How would we make this a little different if there was another player? Nova goes someplace and does something, and the door unlocks, for example, right? Now in the two-player level, in the cooperative level of that, it's like, you have to be doing this while I'm doing this. We both have to have met our objectives, and now that door unlocks. Or even things like, if you were racing through an area, and doing things on your hover bike, well, that's going to be great, but imagine there's two of you, you're kind of like racing at the same time, and, we can even put in things like there's certain power-ups that show up, and whoever gets there first, and like those, then it kind of becomes this fun, challenging element. So I think a lot of that too will be once the single player is really dialed in and feels right, then we can go back through those levels and say, okay, now what little thing we're going to add here? What are we going to change? How are we going to alter this level a little bit to make it really fun for two people? The thing that's kind of exciting actually for us is that we've never had like a single character that's focused on. When we did Brood War, which was the expansion set for the strategy game for Starcraft, one of the biggest comments we got back is that it was for Kerrigan. Everybody said like, "Oh man, you got this villainous," and she was on the box cover, and everybody just like was like all about Kerrigan. Man, she's so cool. And we realized, you know, we really never have that in a game where we've kind of got this one identifiable character. So for us, we do want to kind of create Nova, who is a recognizable character, someone who we do put a lot of focus on. So many times games that have a lot of focus on like stealthy or tactical, you know, action stuff, it's kind of you against everybody, and you don't feel like you're really part of the bigger scope. And one of the things that we really want to push in Ghost is that there are times where, you know, you're out there and you're one of like about 150 people in this battle, you know, and you have your important part, your important role to play. But at the same time, you know, there's stuff going on around you that you really don't control, and it's just happening. We even talked about having some levels where you could sit back and just kind of watch this battle unfold and not really do anything, but after a while your side would lose because you didn't do anything. But within that mix, there's all these different elements that are happening. You know, everybody has their role that they're playing, and but yours just happens to be a little more important. The Starcraft universe is something we've been working on for a long time, so it's really full. We've had 3 novels written about it, got more on the way, we've done action figures, we spent a ton of time working about where we would go with the storyline. And so when this project came up, it was really exciting to our story guys and our creative director in the company to know that they're going to really jump right back in and kind of take a really focused look at a chunk of time within the StarCraft universe. We're going to make sure that you don't have to have played the PC titles. So of course, if people want to go buy them now to, you know, get ready for them, we don't have a problem with that. But we don't want to require that you've done that. We try to never do that with any of the sequels or anything. We want you to play that game, and it's a complete experience there. The real benefit, I think, to players is that, you know, we know how everything works. We know how it all interacts. They're going to be right in the middle of this complete, huge, fully functioning world and get pulled right into it. And I think that the way that we've built the StarCraft universe and with these 3 very unique races, we get a lot of that. And I think that it's going to not only be a really fun game to play, but I think one of the big goals is that when you're done, it's like you've just seen a great movie. You're like, wow, man, that story was so cool.